Part 4 of the second number of Art in Australia, 1917. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Arthur Streeton's Place in Australian Art by Lionel Lindsay. Illustrated by Sydney Harbour and Kent Harvest. In the possession of Baldwin Spencer, Melbourne. Upon the beautiful landscape of Australia there rests neither the romance nor the burden of tradition. Our earliest painters brought their old world ways of thought and handling to its consideration, and even Louis Bouvelot, who came nearest to an Australian way of sight in his Pool at Coleraine, is not free from the prevailing conventions of his day. The discoverer, the first to look into the heart of our landscape, as with the eyes of a child, and reveal its essential mystery, its truth and its beauty, was Arthur Streeton. Consider for a moment what Australian landscape was before the advent of Streeton. The pioneer painters, though they had striven hard to render the forms of our landscape and the character of our trees, were heavily handicapped by a working formula, while their vision had been already cast in a home country mould. In many cases they regretted their transposition, as all men regret the commonplaces of tradition once they are displaced. Visually they were foreigners. The light flickered no longer upon deciduous foliage, so that the drawing-master methods of Fielding and Harding availed them nothing. Aerial perspective was a new difficulty in the face of clear and delicate horizons. The flat masses of gum leaves, with their metallic lustre and elusive greys, their sheen and shimmer of bronze with blue reflections. How could eyes accustomed to the rich distinctive greens of England hope to render their difficult nuances? The problem could only be solved by a native-born artist possessing the necessary genius, whose vision had never been disturbed by the schools of the old world. All artists pass through a period of initiation. They fasten upon the masters of their choice and paraphrase their divinity. Streeton's earliest predilection I have been unable to discover, but that he found himself at an astonishingly early age is evidenced by some of his earliest oils painted upon the cedar of cigar-boxes, in which his characteristics are easily discernible. Bellerive, his birthplace in Victoria, may still preserve his earliest efforts, but it was not until he became a lithographer at Trurdle's in Melbourne, having started life in a wine and spirits store, afterwards serving in a soft goods establishment, that his career was really determined. Here he worked for several years, painting landscape in his hours of freedom, and working at night with McCubbin and Longstaff in the life classes of the National Gallery. All art needs at intervals the stimulus of shock, something coming from without that disturbs the convention of the hour and liberates the trammelled spirit upon a new path. This quickening came to Streeton and Conder when Tom Roberts returned from Paris, bringing the glad tidings of a new technique, broken colour. The tint mixed to no even consistency, but laid in its place finally with the square brush, the fresh gospel of Impressionism, with light as the god of the machine, and all the complacent orthodoxies swept to the limbo of the forgotten. The dauntless three settled in an old house at Eagle Mount near Heidelberg, and for 3 years worked out their salvation in that beautiful undulating country through which the Yarra wanders quietly in the security of her woody banks. Their labours and discoveries in landscape created a revolution in Australian art when they held their Impressionist exhibition of 1892. That year is our 1830. The fetters of convention were irreparably broken, and the first note of nationalism struck in Australian art. Reactionaries objected, but their objections were vain and doomed to extinction, for the revolutionaries had light and truth for their battle cry, and these, in all great causes, must ultimately prevail. Streeton's lovely pastoral, Still glides the stream, and shall for ever glide, which was bought at the instigation of Julian Ashton for the Sydney Gallery, is the masterpiece which crowns this period of his work. It lays its quiet spell upon us ever more surely, because its poetry is inherent in the faithful and delicate rendering of failing light. In the year following, Streeton, Conder and Roberts migrated to Sydney and settled in their Mossman camp, all traces of which have long since been obliterated by suburbia. Streeton's art was now fixed, and the coming years but saw him develop it. His colour, always refined, became richer and more harmonious, his observation surer and more profound. New subject matter he opened up in Fires On, where the treatment of the open face of the range, a blaze of light in the summer sunlight, with trees and hillside receding into the palpable blue of the sky, marks the furthest step in this treatment of light in Australia, until Hayson matured his wonderful art. In his two renderings of the Hawkesbury, Streeton displays absolute genius in the way he has handled the great stretch of countryside until the distance is closed by the amethystine hills. Here we have his peculiar ability at its finest, the power of laying value, colour and character with a stroke of the brush so surely that the atmospheric impression is secured without artifice. This faculty could only be acquired by years spent out of doors. It is no studio art of sources and tricks. Painted entirely in the open, there rests upon it the benediction of the sky. Lyrically it affirms the gift of life, the sovereignty of the sun. Such pictures are adorations, veritable hymns to Apollo, the one and only god of all true landscape painters. In 1896, Streeton left us for the Old World, where he has exploited the picturesque in Venice, Posillipo and Cairo, Chepstow and Corfe. The beautiful reaches of the Thames and the mystery of London fog have in turn attracted his brush, and to their characteristics he has added his inimitable grace, but has suffered the loss of that intimacy. This is the fate of all tourist art, which is embodied in the local soul of things understood from boyhood. In The Centre of the Empire, Streeton's eyesight is still his own, his impressionism as faithful to things seen as in his Australian days. In A Kent Harvest and A Sussex Idyll he returns to his Australian manner, and achieves two exquisite masterpieces. Of all his English work, the most convincing and beautiful. But in Windsor, the Royal Barge at Eton, Corfe Castle, the Chalk Pit, and all the heavier machines, I feel that there are other influences at work, and that the gay and exquisite impressionist has become a picture builder, availing himself of the formula of the masters, and that he has forsworn his birthright. Upon two return visits to Australia, Streeton painted Australia Felix and the fine Sydney Harbour across Cremorne, which was acquired by one of Streeton's most generous patrons, Sir Baldwin Spencer. Here he submits himself again to the charm and virtues of his native land, forgetting the recipes he had acquired abroad. In the Sydney Harbour panels of this period he plays again with colour like a magician, and if upon a louder and less delicate scale than in his earlier harbour pieces, still with a bravura that is rich and brilliant. Undoubtedly, the loss of Streeton to Australia is a heavy and irreplaceable one, for his art, as fresh and natural as the song of a bird, has revealed our country to us. But perhaps ours is the blame, that in the lean years following the bursted boom, he was forced to leave us for a handful of silver. But our permanent gain is that he matured his talent before he left us in a series of masterpieces that began with Golden Summer and Still Glides the Stream, and ended with Fires On and the Hawkesbury. These are our proud possessions, and the cornerstones of Australian landscape. In them, faithful to the mood of the light, with no romantic instinct to clothe the facts with the ideal character of a vision, Streeton has revealed the native beauty of our country, its light, its gaiety, and its charm of colour, with the incomparable style which is genius. In that revelation he has raised his own most enduring monument. End of Part 4.